I'm Nick Kasab. I'm a computational architect. I now work at a startup that's spun out of Google X, and I'm one of those computational geeks. Like, got really into Grasshopper when I was in undergrad architecture, and then fell down that rabbit hole even further into a master's of computer graphics. But I've always had one toe into architecture and design and one toe into computer programming. And now that the tools for computer programming are much more robust, I feel like I have superpowers, and I want to talk about those superpowers.
Love that intro. Um, I'm John. I've been into B2B SaaS for over a decade, full stack go to market, and dipped into product a ton. And I got into building with mostly no and low code tools. And so I joined Coda 7.5 years ago. I was always in Notion, Airtable, Zapier. And I thought AI was hype until February of last year when 3.5 became 3.7 Sonnet from Anthropic, Claude. And Claude Code didn't even come out for like months after. So it was my like no code, low code vibe coding stack was very much like these are a lovable bolt and whatever. And I was hitting all these dead ends. And at the time, engineers were just starting to get into it. They're like, hey, you can like pull these agentic coding things into an IDE. And I was like, what's an IDE? So I pulled Cursor for the first time and download VS Code. I'm like, I have no clue what I'm doing. That was when I shared the YouTube video with you, right? In
Yeah,
May, I was like, I think I'm going somewhere. I don't know what
yeah,
localhost is. And like, dude, we have to start talking every single week until we figure this out.
yeah,
That's where we are, almost a year later. Dude, that's nuts. When I
yeah.
share what we do, because a lot of people are like looking for internal resources in their company and they're like not finding it. They feel kind of alone. I was talking to a guy here and he was like, my mom has been in web development and she's the one I talked to about AI tools.
Damn, I wish I had a mom like that.
Me
My
too.
mom can't remember her passwords.
Yeah, my mom doesn't know what the difference between like Google Drive and Word is. And so yeah, I feel like you have to go like outside or build your own community here. And it's been awesome.
Yeah,
I've loved our pair programming, whatever you want to call it, vibe
me
coding sessions every week.
me too. And I think it's funny because in the past, when I was learning Grasshopper at the very, very beginning, I had a buddy, and that experience was really fun because we would go back and forth, and it was like really social. And then, there was also a whole community with the Grasshopper forums. Like, the Grasshopper forums were such a dynamic place where people were asking questions and answering questions, and you had all of these personalities who kind of felt famous, because you could kind of see their name all over these plugins and things that they've built. And I feel like that side of things, at least in the creative coding community, is sort of silent right now.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like there's like a particular hub where there's a lot of social activity going on. And I think what's happening is that people are asking these questions and answering these questions with their AI tools, right? And
Yeah.
so those spaces don't exist anymore. But it's interesting because it's like the social element of actually speaking to a human being rather than your AI is so valuable. It's so much more valuable than, like, it's much more than just having the AI answer your coding question, right? There's so much more there in terms of like what to build, why to build it, how to build it, and to predict what's happening in the future. Because I don't think AI can do that just yet, and I don't think really AI will ever understand. Well, I shouldn't say these things. These are like kind of grandiose statements.
Yeah.
AI is continuing to blow everyone's minds every single day, so maybe we should just keep talking about that.
And keep talking to AI. I feel like the AI companies, like we were talking about social media and engagement and whatever, I feel like they're building in like loops and hooks even into their system prompts of like wanting to keep you using the service and whatnot. But like it can get the information, but it doesn't like really have taste and can't direct you and can't really go like cross-functional, and like human relationships are like more important than, I don't know, human
Yeah,
AI.
well,
So
you get different answers depending on the questions you ask it, right?
yeah,
So I've noticed this in particular when I'm trying to learn about another industry that I'm not an expert in, right? Um, and if I if I ask it sort of super general questions, I get super general answers. But if I ask it specific questions, like the most specific example of this is like if I say, what are the 10 principles of design,
yep.
right? I'll get something super generic back. But if I say, what are the 10 principles of design according to this famous designer, I'm blanking on his name right now, the German guy, um, the one that Joni Ive was like a fan of, whatever.
Braun.
Yeah,
Um,
Braun. Um,
yeah. Let me come
yeah,
back.
yeah. If I ask the AI, like, give me the 10 principles of design according to this specific designer, I get a much better response, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And the names of people that are important to an industry, I think that's still kind of a gatekeeping mechanism between industries or professions or like sets of expertise.
Yeah. Yeah. You're talking about data rams.
Theater realms, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Um, we're going to talk about design engineering, and it was funny actually what kind of got me into space. So in January of last year, well, the fires had just happened in Los Angeles, and I was working with an executive coach at the time, and so the combination of that gave me a lot of space to figure things out. And I was in this like weird part of my career where I was like, I think I'm this like mix of the core is like solution engineer, solution architect. You can kind of describe it as that, as someone who like deeply understands the user and has all these like tangential divergent skills across go to market and product sensibility. And I was like, but there's like not a community and I don't quite know like who to talk to. And I'm just getting into starting to build some of these tools. And it was Vercel. They had a landing page for like targeting design engineers at the time. I don't know if they have that anymore. And they're like explaining their tool in the language of what a design engineer
Mm,
would want to see. And so there's some of it where I was like, oh, I know what system designs are. And like I've worked with UX teams, and there it's like, I get that value prop. And then all of the other value props, I'm like, I have no clue what they're saying. It was like a bunch of like terminal NPMs. And I'm like,
mhm,
yeah, you lost me, but I think I'm onto something.
mhm,
And their in-house design engineers had written this like pretty long article about like what is design engineering in practice and how we do it, et cetera. I'm like, oh, I like that's where I want to point. Like I've been trying to like become this solution architect or sales engineer, but it was like hitting all these weird dead ends in the market. And I was like, oh, that's like much closer to like where I've been pointing and want to go. And it was like I stayed very close to Vercel and even like the cursor just websites from a content perspective and try to learn what they're doing. And then eventually got into the tooling and kind of like spun myself up on that. But yeah, it was an interesting
yeah,
journey.
that's actually super fascinating. 2 points on that. One is that I also was motivated by Vercel
Mm,
and their marketing to like really dive deeper on this. There's a really big billboard in Brooklyn, like as you're coming over the Manhattan Bridge, and it says like just ship it. And I was kind of like, yeah, I guess I should just ship whatever toy I'm playing with.
it's awesome.
Um, so it's really funny that you mentioned Vercel, but I will and then going back to the design engineering thing, this is a really interesting topic because um, as I was graduating out of Cornell's architecture program, there really wasn't a master's program focused on improving my skill set, which is like I'm a designer and I've gotten really into technology, but I'm not a engineer, right? And so I'm sort of in that middle ground of like being a technologist, being a designer. and it's useful. It's like super useful to people, but there's no home, right? And
Yeah.
so I got lucky because I was able to get into a master's program that was more on the engineering side, and they just kind of ignored my engineering shortcomings because I was so creative. Um, and essentially 10 years later, Cornell creates a master's program called the Program of Design Technology, which is a
Mm,
whole college with like the whole point is to bring people from different domains, specifically design domains too, but also outside design domains, and teach them both design and technology at the same time to basically give them that skill set to go deep and broad, because there was this understanding that these tools were going to get easier to use. They were going to be able to go deeper and supercharge people's skill sets, and that those tools were sort of able to help the world, right? Help these like industries and professions be able to do more with a lot more capability.
yeah.
But
The,
I was brought back to TA and to teach in that department, which is like it was just such an interesting full circle there.
it's so cool. Yeah, Cornell, we joined at a funny time because they eventually did the tech campus in Europe, which I think helped a ton. And it like bled back to Ithaca. But I remember at the time, so I was taking like, information science. They had a strong IS department, and computer science, I didn't think it was that strong. And there's like no design. There's like nothing. So it's always like going on YouTube and watching d.school stuff from Stanford, and design thinking out of IDEO. And there's just like no crossover from Silicon Valley SF stuff into the Cornell education.
Well,
So
it
I'm having to teach myself that side
it
of the house.
yeah, it was fascinating because at the time the business school hired someone from IDEO to teach design thinking in the business school,
Uh,
and without any kind of communication with the architecture school, which was architecture, art, and planning, and then the design school, which was housed inside of human ecology, right?
that's right.
And so the campus and the university as a whole was moving towards the consolidation of like the business school with the hotel school becoming part of that, and
Mm-hmm.
then the engineering school kind of like already had its identity as like we engineer things, right? But
Yeah.
the design side was lagging behind significantly, and so much so that the other schools were looking outside for for like design resources that would help them in their particular department. And that I think was like pretty alarming for the design side. And so that's when I think they got their stuff together and decided to really push for this unified identity around design, in particular with design technology. I think they haven't quite done it yet with the other sides of design in over there, but it's a lot of legacy stuff that they are beholden to or have to interact with, that it makes it really difficult for them to pitch this idea that design is a skill set that goes across domains.
That's right. Yeah. I think like at least when we joined, if you wanted to be like a true interdisciplinary designer, like human ecology would probably be the best school because they're like that's where human centered design was sitting on campus. And there's like no like tech really getting into it, but it had all the programs. Did you know the hotel school was a spin out from UMac in the
Oh,
20s?
really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's
It makes
interesting.
sense, right? And, it's like service base, home, the thing has to look nice, like service design. No one was talking about that, but I was getting into that. I was like,
Yeah.
there's like these human touch points throughout the hospitality experience.
The history of design education is super interesting because like once you get into like design research and ergonomics and things that are like, you know, really, really rigorous design work,
Mm-hmm.
that's where things get super interesting because I think a lot of people look at design and think that it's just about making things that look pretty. And
Yeah.
then it's only through a design education that you understand that it's about so much more than that. And that making things that look pretty or look good is like really hard. And that it's that looking good or looking pretty comes out of something else. It comes out of like a deeper understanding of material, like
Mhm.
what the Eames, what Eames had with plywood furniture, right? And their research out of like bending plywood for splints in the military. Do you know about this?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean that's where the beauty of their work comes from. It's not just sort of like making something creative or innovative for innovation's sake. It's sort of like, no, this thing truly is an elegant solution to this problem. And it's only through the techniques that you develop in design, which is like iteration and charrettes and sort of like creative problem solving, that don't really exist in other disciplines or other professions.
Yeah. On that topic, so the office of Eames is like one of the first interdisciplinary, like actually design technology. Like they're like kind of industrial design, but they're playing around with like graphics and storytelling. And then, they're hired by the IBM design program, and Noise and Paul Rand, et cetera, come on board. It was like, oh, that's what good design, like integrated into tech and business philosophy and art and whatever, like looks like. And maybe we're having like a new thing now, but like
Well,
more hearing.
yeah, I mean, I think, IDEO has become IDEO and Stanford in the D.school have
Yeah.
become the sort of like the epicenter of how design thinks in that sort of interdisciplinary problem solving kind of way, especially around designing the strategy of a business or designing the strategy of a product or thinking about humans in the loop, like system design thinking.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, it's interesting because it's not quite codified um, yet in other places, but it's super, super useful and super powerful. And people outside of this world are not really exposed to that type of work.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of I think his name is Rio Lu. That's how you pronounce it. RYO. He was leading design at Notion and recently joined Cursor.
Mm.
I feel
I I feel like I maybe have seen some of his stuff.
like, okay.
Is he
Um,
was he at App? You said he was at Notion.
Notion, then moved to Cursor. If you go to RYO dot maybe LU, that's an actual domain. That's a portfolio site. But yeah, I've been kind of like watching very loosely some of this stuff. And I just think it's interesting when you're at a company like Cursor, which is like very building engineering heavy, obviously, but they're building this like weird vibe stack or whatever you want to say. Like like what Figma was maybe 20 years ago for design community. I feel like Cursor is actually starting to kind of get its wedge into, because designers are becoming engineers, or it's like the stack is collapsing and overlapping. You're a member of the technical staff. We don't care. What? And so, anyways, I was watching his interview last night, and he was basically that. He was like, we kind of just like gotten rid of all the roles. We just hire people who are like generalists, technologists, who have like a strong sense of aesthetic and what needs to be done, and user experience, and like that. And we're all coming together and working really fast and iterating. And you and I have talked about this, where it's like,
Yeah,
especially early in our career, when we're like, I want to be a generalist. I'm interested in all these things. I'm like not moving like as far or like as high up, etc. That others who are just like really, really focused. Um, but I feel like we're in this time where, because AI and the tooling or whatever is like helping us, give us superpowers, like the generalist is actually maybe the superpower, and we
yeah,
can go further and faster, etc.
yeah. I think there's definitely, something to be said about the parallels between now and the Renaissance era, right? Where you sort of have this explosion in capabilities, um, because there's really been a step change in there's been a tool that's so cross-platform, like the printing press, right?
Mhm.
And this idea that now, we can do so much more, and so there's a lot of creative energy around doing so many different things. Um, and I think there are a ton of parallels there. Um, so, I think hopefully this space where we're talking can be a space where we can be optimistic about these
Yeah.
changes. I think there are a lot of voices out there that are pessimistic and critical, and I think that they're doing a fantastic job. They need to keep being critical and thinking deeply about that. And I think that hopefully we can add to that conversation by adding the sort of optimistic, um, maybe directional or aspirational, inspirational kind of like language to the conversation as well.
Yeah.
Because I think me personally, I find it more useful than kind of like the critical stance of what shouldn't be done. There are a lot more instances or answers of like what shouldn't be done versus what should be done or what could be done.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so I think it's a little bit harder to think about like, all of these tools provide more challenges as well. So like, w- what do you do when that happens?
Yeah. I've been thinking about this a lot of like this topic is very polarizing from like a career perspective, design, and just like using AI in general. And there's a lot of AI hype that kind of like gets into my feeds, and they're like, I prompt engineered and I did this, and I'm running 7 open claws on all my Mac Minis and whatever. I think we've called my Claude Bros or whatever in the back.
Claude boys, yeah.
Yes. And then there's obviously the whole like doomer crowd that has like a scale. It's the people who are like, F this, I'm an artist. Why are they taking like art away from humans? There's the Bernie Sanders who's like, do the billionaires really want you to like be more creative, etc., or are they just trying to optimize you and like kick you out and become very, very rich, like universal basic income side? And then there's the people who's like actual like livelihood is going to shift a lot. And I feel like very traditional designers, like you said, that just want to make things look pretty, like their livelihood is actually like the craft is significantly changing. And so you're talking about the print press. I think like if you were to fast forward a bit to when it hit the arts and crafts movement, I'm hoping that's actually kind of where we are, or maybe like these entire timelines are just really really compressed right now, where you have like really awesome stuff coming out of the UK with like William and Morris and the wood blocks and like type explorations of Japan, and it's like the art is beautiful, but it's being like pumped out at a rate that like people aren't used to. And so you have like small houses of like designers mixed with factories that are like highly productive and get their name out and have strong brand and become like very rich very fast. In a way that like artists never were able to. And you're like putting art on wallpaper now. Like that's insane.
Yeah. I
Can
think
you believe how fast like and the access to like aesthetic and really beautiful things and whatever, and it's just like blown up where people used to have like pink walls or they're like shitty. It's like now so many more people have access to this stuff. I think
yeah.
we're just in this like awkward in between of like, yeah,
Yeah, I can't wait to dig into more of those topics with you because I think, it's just going to be so fun to get into all of that because like one example is thinking about, these this historic analogies, right? Like there's the analogy with the Renaissance, but there's also the analogy with when the camera came out and became like a consumer product, right? I always love to tell this story, but there's a fantastic museum in the Berkshires that the Clark Institute, where the reason why that I loved that museum in particular is because the collection goes from like let's say 1860 to 1930, like that's the time period where those collectors were collecting all of these paintings and putting them up in the Berkshires. And what's really fascinating about that time period is that the camera gets invented in 1890. Kodak releases their sort of like mass market camera in 1890. And what's really interesting about the Clark is you'll go there and you'll see paintings prior to 1890 and you'll see paintings post 1890, and they look very, very different, right? The prior 1890 stuff is all very photoreal and
Mm.
trying to live up to this like aspiration of being like super, super realistic. You get like the Hudson School painters, like really, really fantastic landscapes that are just gorgeous and beautiful. And then afterwards, you get the move towards abstraction or other forms of like creative painting. And my particular lens of a technologist tells me that the one of the main reasons for that shift is that the camera can now sort of like very quickly and easily reproduce, you know, realism, right? And so then painters are no longer burdened by having to produce realistic paintings. They are now free from that responsibility or from that burden. And in fact, like where they go towards first, at least from what I've seen in history, is color. Right? That's like one of the biggest first explorations that happens after 1890. And the reason I give there is like, well, what's the first thing that cameras were not able to do? They weren't able to do color. They were black and white cameras, right?
Yeah.
So you got the impressionists who were so obsessed with trying to understand how color worked and how color could be represented realistically that they switched to sort of pointillism or impressionist strokes, and where they're like masters of color. And I think actually like some of the best color work in ever that has ever been done comes from that time period because they were so obsessed with trying to figure it out. And so, you know, I, what fascinates me is like if you take that analogy to this day and era, what are those things that AI can't quite yet do? Right? That's
Like,
like a really interesting artistic exploration. And then what are the things that AI enables you to do that you weren't able to do before? There's a really fantastic creative coder who works at Google who released a really fun experiment where they made like a isometric SimCity style version of New York City, and they did it using you know Google Gemini
yeah.
and Nano Banana, and he blogs throughout the entire process of like what it's like to kind of create a tool that can do this, and he explains that it wasn't actually easy to do, right? Because he has to do like all of these intricate little fixes or band-aids to get the
Yeah.
system to work properly. I can actually probably pull it up while you're
Yeah.
while you're
Yeah.
chatting. What do you think?
Yeah. Pull it up.
Oh yeah, here, screen. He gave he made a snow version after he made the original one,
Ah,
but
nice.
it's just so
Man.
so satisfying.
Oh, this is so detailed.
Yeah.
What?
Look, yeah, because what he did was he took the same angle, like the same isometric angle for all of the Google Earth imagery, and
Right.
then just pumped it through Nano Banana,
But
and had
this is huge.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it goes all the way
All of
out
the
into like
turtles.
JFK, Coney Island, Rockaways,
Heck.
which is like would have been completely impossible to do by hand. I mean, like maybe not impossible because it would have just taken forever, but
Years. Yeah.
yeah,
Whoa. What is this called? Isometric dot NYC. What is that?
isometric.nyc, yeah. And there's a really excellent write-up about this project. So his his tag is Canonide, and I found his stuff through Twitter, but really talented software engineer at Google Brain. Just like this was like a fun weekend project for him, which is the other crazy thing. It's like this guy has a full-time job,
Yeah.
and he's testing out like the capabilities of these tools. So you're absolutely right. There's like,
You're absolutely right.
well, there's latent potential now, right? There's like insane latent potential. Um, and sure, the AI hypers are talking about like business use cases and things like that, and that's fine. But the potential here for the expansion of like cultural artifacts is just um, enormous.
Can you imagine all the like wall art or books that you can put together with this sort of thing?
Yeah, yeah,
Screenshots. Do you ever hang out at like your school or your neighborhood on this thing?
yeah. I mean, the first thing I did was like go. That's the first thing anyone wants to do, right? Is to go where they grew up or
Uh-huh.
places that they're super familiar with and to see how this tool kind of like represents it. Um, yeah, the thing that I found really fascinating is going to places that like never get represented in this
Right.
way, right?
That's right.
Like deep, deep Rockaways or Staten Island.
Wait, oh yeah, it is a borough. Oh wait, it got kind of cut off.
That's exactly that's exactly right. Yeah,
Rough.
that was a little Easter egg to all the people who went to actually look. I just love that Staten Island gets almost cut out completely.
It's like not really. Yeah, not really New York City.
Yeah,
Brutal. Hmm. What's the AI tech scene in New York City like?
interesting. You know, I think ever since COVID, we've kind of had maybe it's just me. I haven't really met up with people in person as much. But I think because New York has this cultural identity,
Hmm.
and there seems to be this um, belief that AI is a danger to art or a danger to the humanities and a danger to culture, which it does have the capacity to be a danger to those, like disciplines.
Mhm.
Um, I think that there's the energy much more is sort of against AI. And so it's much harder to find people who are interested in like the aspirational or inspirational parts of
Yeah.
these new tool sets. I think people are scared.
Wow. Hmm. It's an interesting perspective. Yeah, I feel like I've been working for SF companies forever, and so my bubble is like almost only AI hype. And I read an interesting article from an engineer either at Microsoft or had recently left Microsoft, lives in San Francisco, used to be up in Red in Seattle. And he was like, people in Seattle in tech fucking hate AI. And he goes into an analysis. And the main thesis was he thinks it's because of Copilot.
Oh, interesting.
Or
Because of Microsoft.
yeah, because of how shitty Copilot is.
Remember, I mean, when Copilot first came out, it was pretty impressive, but it got leapfrogged pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Um, I remember I was working with a friend of mine, similar to you, kind of having conversations about AI code, like vibe coding and AI coding, and he's a software engineer at Microsoft, and he was very, very skeptical for a really long time that AI could actually do these really difficult long context tasks, right? Um, and then there was a switch that flipped recently with uh, Opus 4.6, but even earlier with Opus 4.5 coming out, that just like actually OpenAI Codex too. That was like a big lights on moment for him where he was like, oh, this is a solvable problem. It's not like we're hitting a wall here that we can't get past. And I think that's the thing that people don't quite understand fully or can't grasp is that it, you know, I see people talk about capabilities that what can AI not do? right? But they're talking about it from a 6 month, that was like 6 months ago, or that was 8 months ago or a year ago where AI couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And like, have you tried these tools today? They can do those things, and that's exciting and scary, but you need to be current about these things because, like, you know, especially if you're in a competitive field, right? Like, you need to keep abreast of all of the latest information.
Yeah. Anything else you want to talk about design engineering?
I think we should just get into talking about your project, the thing that you made. I mean, we have been dancing around this topic of like, you've been
Yeah.
working at this for a year. Let's see what you built.
A year. Wow. Um, what's interesting to you? What do you think would be interesting to folks?
I think like, at least for me, because I had a very similar experience, I also built something. I think for me, what's interesting is that, like, the promise and the initial excitement around these tools is, oh, I can build something and it's right there in front of me.
Hmm.
And then, like, why did it take you a year to get to where you are now? Not as like an accusation,
Yeah.
but to say, like, what are all of those other things that you're doing that sort of like makes it much more robust, like much more polished, rather than just
Yeah.
like
Mm.
a throwaway thing.
Yeah. Maybe I group into like 4 chapters of the journey. You come in chapter 2. Um, so and we've talked a bit about these people who are like sit in tech, but sit kind of outside of the normal current. And so you have like Sahil, who started Gumroad, now anti-work, like in this space. And he's always been very much like, build your own thing. Maybe don't take VC. There's the Jason and DHH from 37 Signals who ended up creating Basecamp and a few other products that are like very much in the space of like super serve your customers, overserve them, grow forever, be on your own terms. And so it's actually quite a small community within the area of tech because I've worked at VC backed. A lot of people in tech have, and there's like a mix of interest of you're trying to like make the thing look good and shiny, and then take the funding while you can have that hyper growth, while customers are like almost always secondary. And so usually in any good business or like a UX designer thinks about their customer first. And so what I did in December, I had recently gone to Lenny, like the Lenny newsletter and podcast, recently gone to his event. Coda built actually the event and white labeled it with him. And so they were talking about V0, and it was like the first time that I ever heard about it. And so I was like starting to tinker and play around in December. And in January, I sat down, I was like, okay, how can I like super serve my community? Like who are a few people who I can like really, really serve and who I have domain expertise and knowledge of. And you're starting to see this now where people are like, yeah, sure, you can build any piece of software, but it's like you really need like the SME domain expertise to deliver on anything of value. And so I sat down, I wrote a big long list of names, wrote my skill sets and like solutions that I was thinking of. And I was like, okay, I'm going to, DM Vince, top one on my list. He's a sales engineer right now. And we're going to like talk about the problem space. And so we were talking about I'd been a sales engineer for like, it's probably the longest role that I've ever had in any sort of company is being a sales or, a solution engineer. And so they have this unique role where they deeply understand the product and they're kind of close to the product team. They actually sit with sales and the sales team and doing all pre-sales. So trying to convince a customer from discovery all the way to close that there's like a good fit. And they have all this like domain knowledge of what the thing can do. And you basically have to like communicate that out throughout the entire sales process. And they usually use these like really shitty archaic artifacts called RFPs, like requests for proposals. And I know that you have RFPs and RFIs and architecture. Like a ton of the different industries have this, where it's like you have a thing out in the market, a company, a government agency, or whatever, and they like need a solution. And
Hmm.
I'm just having to prototype this in a vertical that I'm like very familiar with. But what's cool is this architecture can kind of actually like move into
Yeah.
different domains. And so we sat down. I was like, I've heard about this thing called retrieval augmented generation. If you dump a big like repository of all of your product knowledge and past RFPs, can we get AI to effectively respond to them as they come through? And instead of 48 hours, can we do this in like an hour and cut off like a ton of time, free you up to actually like work with clients or prototype new solutions instead of respond to these big docs? And so they were a Gemini house. We prototyped it in Gemini, and it was like the responses looked good to me. And he was like, "Dude, it's hallucinating like a shit ton. Like this actually isn't at quality."
Mm.
And I was like, "Okay, what about Claude? Let's try it with Claude." And I was like, "Yeah, that isn't working." And so I started talking with more SEs, and they're like, "Yeah, we're using ChatGPT." And I was like, "How's it working?" And they're like, "Really good for just like single, can it do this and
Mm.
respond? But if you're trying to do anything that's like comprehensive, it's like, nah, it's hallucinating a ton. You have to chunk it and whatever." And then I started doing like research of the problem space and like what solutions existed. There's a ton of legacy stuff and a few new startups. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. There's like a gap in the market too. So I have like domain expertise in this area. It's a problem that I think can be solved with technology. There's a gap in the market. It's going to accelerate. More people are going to want it. Like, do people want to pay for it? Yeah, it's like a really clear ROI business case too. Most of the AI stuff that's coming out is either like very clear back of office automation stuff, or like, can I get more revenue? So it's going like sales and marketing dollars. Like, oh, cool. It's a combination of that. It's back office operations and sales and marketing. Cool. Business opportunity. And so I took sabbatical. I came back and I was like, there's this thing called Claude Code. I've kind of prototyped this thing in all the like V0 lovable bolts and whatever, but like, can I actually like start building that? And that's where you and I started hanging out. I think I built a CRM first, right? It was like the most generic basic thing. And then um, and that was a 6-week boot camp, right? And at the end of it, I demoed something in an Electron app on localhost.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it took me the entire summer to get it off of my machine into the cloud. Got beta testers into it, which is like, yeah, phase, chapter 3. And then in September, I started like running a sales research pipeline.
Mm.
And so the way that I like to do research or sales is just to like flatten it and merge it. And so you do like founder-led discovery, which is founder-led sales. So I would demo the thing, get people into the tool, and then have them like try to use it. And no one was using it because it was like they were hitting bugs or like it wasn't working. There's no example data. I didn't have Google Auth or login. And so that brings us to the chapter 4, where I got like very close to a few contracts, but no one was actually into the tool. And so I was like, oh, fuck it. I'm going to go from sales led growth to product led growth. And I'm just going to like build out. I still have it on a sticky note here. It's like, it says complete the work. And so I'm just like completing the app right now. And moving from something that's like vibey on my local hosts, we joke about this, like, it's greenfield, like evergreening the local hosts into a production app is a ton of work. And so anytime I see someone being like, you can't vibe code a solution or whatever, I was like, yeah, that's actually true. If you put vibe coding into like a container of just prototyping, but you can use the exact same tool set to get it to production. And so like through this entire process, I've basically become a software engineer because I have to know like what Git and CI/CD and IDE and CLI and like getting the thing, and there's security and there's row level security and role-based access control and webhooks and tokens and all that sort of stuff. Like, because the AI gets you into domains that you don't understand and basically get in trouble, then you have to like learn the technology, or you just don't learn the technology and get like screwed over in the back end, which I think is like what a lot of the chatter is around. Like, you can't vibe code a thing, it won't scale, et cetera. It's like, yeah, you can, but you just need to like learn this stuff. And so that's where we are now. It's like the thing's built out, getting my first customers, almost like the doors are open, but it's like essentially it's like almost, it's like soft opening, right? Like I've let friends into it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because obviously you have like this big success metric that you're driving towards, which is like paid users, right? Or paying users. But I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit as well about the added benefits of just going through the process, because even though it took you, let's call it a year to get to where you are now, if you were to turn around and do this again for a different product, do you think it would take you a year?
Oh no, it took me a day. So we were talking about this earlier. Like I have a lot of understanding of what a CRM is, and I've almost always used CRM as like the way to build something. And so this solution has like a lightweight CRM built into it. And a friend like walks on over and he's like, "Hey, dude, I was like going to vibe code to CRM," and I was like, "Just take my boilerplate of like what this thing is," and I was like, "I think it's just going to take me an hour." It took me like 5, but basically, it's like, yeah, once you have the stack and everything set up, replicating this is so much faster, especially if you know like what software development kits you can use or packages or open source frameworks like ShadCN UI. You can just like pull these components from these repositories, copy and paste like pseudocode, and it can spit out like really nice stuff.
Yeah, that's honestly like the other thing that I'm really excited about is like the AI stack on top of open source and on top of Git and GitHub. And this has been like a big thing that I always love to teach other design engineers is like I love introducing designers to GitHub. And this idea now that like not only can you now as a design engineer go in and understand GitHub and understand other people's projects on GitHub, but adding AI on top of that and add sort of like AI understanding of someone's repo and just being able to like pull whatever was happening in that other repo as long as it's open source, as long as you have the right licensing, as long as all of those things are concerned, like that you've got that figured out, bringing that into your project, into that repo is like so fast, so quick, and feels like a superpower.
Yeah, it's incredibly fast. Um, since we're hanging out, I'll kind of show you where I am and what the stack looks like. So this is Next.js with, like I was saying, Tailwind CSS, which is open ShadCN components, and a bit of like image gen across ChatGPT, Midjourney, etc. So that's what's here. You and I were talking about Vercel. They created Next.js, like maybe in-house or as part of the company, or maybe they created it before and incorporated it. I don't know what the IP assignment is, but anyways, there, and whatever his actual name is, ShadCN UI works there. So there's there's just like a lot going on for Sal and programmatically designing this sort of stuff. And so marketing page, right? Like this has been a slow iteration. So this is actually Kelsey, my wife, I guess, for people who are watching. She pulled up a Claude chat session and was like, "Hey, my husband's trying to build this thing. Can you like help me write the web copy?" And it was like, "I'll help you write it and I'll just code it out for you." And she's like, "What? you can't do that." And so yeah, this original thing came as a download from a Claude chat, and you can see some of their. I haven't changed a few of these like design decisions. If you look across websites now, you'll actually see these patterns start to replay across different like sections or components on a website. But this was all like very much hand coded. Like I went to Mammon, I went to things that like were like, inspiring. I like played around, like tweaked it. This is as close as the hand coding as possible, because like the AI still doesn't have taste. And so you need to put like design systems, components, and have like a really strong point of view for this sort of stuff. And it's not going to automatically be like, okay, I'm going to take components of your application. I'm then going to make them marketing ready with copy that's like really compelling and interesting. And I'm going to make it like responsive on a marketing website. But once you like see these patterns in the world, you realize like, oh, it's totally possible if you just have like a really strong point of view and direct AI to be able to code this. Like, I didn't hand code any of this, but I was like, this is exactly what I want. And it took a few like iterations to go after it. But like crazy, it figured out the whole responsive design. Like this UI and this is like different. It had breakpoints. Like that's crazy. This would have taken me a really long time to code out.
Yeah, I think like front end in particular, like there's a reason why back end engineers hate front end engineering. It's like very tedious. And I think like the people who are good at front end engineering are good at design too. So I think for front end engineering, vibe coding is like a godsend. Um, but yeah, it's again, I'm just like, this is super impressive to me. This is super, like, it looks super good. Um, and yeah, it's just an iterative process, right? It's like you keep building towards getting customers.
Yeah, that's right. The last thing that I wanted to share here is I don't think you need CMSs anymore. You saw that actually Lee, the guy who's doing developer relations at Vercel, just recently joined Cursor. They moved Cursor's website into just code, and
Just
so
HTML.
yeah, yeah, JS. And so the blog is 100% Markdown MDX files within my code base, and it's rendered through packages
Hmm.
that like allow you to kind of build a blog
Mm.
infrastructure. And so it allows me to be like lighter. The AI can reach into the stuff and generate better. And because Claude Code is a generalized AI, it can also be a writing assistant. And so what I'll often do is I think there's a ton of like AI slop out there for writing. So I write the markdown file. I ask it for like recommendations and grammar or whatever. And so yeah,
Hmm.
it's like you can like write in the IDE your content and generate the content. I think there's just like a ton that we can do with everything
Yeah.
with these agents.
Yeah. When I redid my personal website and was also working on the blog for Recipe Studio, um, there was a split at that point where I was like, I started off with just markdown files, right? And I think the only reason why I went towards a CMS for Recipe Studio was because I was messing around with like having the AI manage the blogging, right? And there was like a management layer that I wanted to sort of take to oversee, like which blogs were posted when and have control over that. So it's just interesting, especially because you could probably ask Claude Code to like vibe up a CMS for RFX, and
Yeah.
because it doesn't have to be so polished, right? It can just exist as a tool for you on the back end.
Mm. Um, wait, what CMS did you choose? Was it headless?
Um, I just built its own CMS yeah,
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
yeah, and I have a little like dashboard with like when was the blog published and how do I edit this. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not editing the blog posts in the CMS on the website,
Okay.
but I'm still doing that in the console. But I have like a dashboard that shows like all of the blogs.
Man, I feel like a bunch of these like more utility developer tools are just going to be built in house for what people need. This is going
Yeah,
nuts.
yeah.
All right, dude, this has been fun. Thanks for
This has
hanging
been
out.
great. Yeah.
I'll